Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for your daily dose of the roars as we scream about the very stupid stuff going on in the world of technology. Do remember I do these videos in order to support Silicon Dojo, free hands-on technology education in Durham, North Carolina. If you're interested, take a look at silicondojo.com to see what our schedule is. If you'd like to support our classes, there is a donor box link down below. And with that, let's get into the Ballad of Nexperia. That's right, it's the telenovela that apparently has no end. It goes on, my friend, because the world is just a very, very stupid place right now. So anyways, I've been talking about this for a while because I think this is the metaphor for basically the Western world in regards vis-a-vis China, where basically the Western world thinks they can tell China what to do, and China will say, sorry, oh so sorry, and do whatever it is we said. But, you know, it is 2025, going into 2026, China, man, getting a little tired of Yankee crap, and so they are starting to push back, and the West doesn't know what to do. The West literally doesn't know what to do when China man doesn't yield. We don't know what to do when the China man doesn't just automatically back down and say, I'm so sorry. Right? I think this is going to be a big problem going into the future. So we've seen this with Nexperia. Like the worst thing, the most idiotic thing about this whole Nexperia disaster is, right, the Netherlands. So the Netherlands seized the headquarters of Nexperia. Nexperia is a company that was purchased by a Chinese company called Wingtech. Basically, the headquarters were in the Netherlands. Wafer manufacturing is in Europe, and then all of the wafers were sent to China to be packaged. And I think one of the things that was most concerning about all of this was that Karaman's, the wall licker in chief, right, of the European Union, literally stated that he did not foresee the Chinese retaliation. Like, what? It wasn't like he foresaw Chinese retaliation, tried to mitigate the problems, and didn't realize supply chain issues. It wasn't that understood that there could be retaliation, but literally, Karaman's came out and stated he did not foresee the Chinese retaliation. We're just like, what? What? What do you mean? You stole their company. You fucking stole the Chinese. That's what you did. You stole the Chinese company, and you didn't think they would retaliate like at all. Like what is wrong with you? I think about this again, the metaphor of Nexperia in the Western world with China. Like right now, there's this war games that were currently going on for the United States. You know, with if we get into a war with China, and then it came back that if we got into a war with China, it would be fucking brutal. It would be brutal. Aircraft carriers destroyed, hundreds of thousands of Americans dead. Just a complete and utter disaster. And the funny part is, the funny part is you're like, yeah, so if we get into a war with China, we have to ship all of our military equipment across the fucking ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of miles we have to move our equipment. China is there. They got 1.4 billion people. Any way you cut it, they've got 4x the population that we do. They have a massive amount of industrial capacity, right? And they're a huge fucking country to have to deal with. So yeah, if we have to ship all of our equipment to Taiwan or to Japan or even to Korea, and then from there we have to get into a war with China, and China has 4x the population and everything else. Yeah, it's gotta be a disaster. Wait. Really? We lost against the Taliban. I just want to put this on the table. We lost against the fucking Taliban. Like, what do you think going to war against a near-peer adversary when we have to be the expeditionary force? What the hell do you think that's gonna look like? But anyways, right, and that's one of the reasons that I'm bringing this stuff up is not, and it sounds horrible to say, I'm not even saying we shouldn't get into, I don't think we should get into war. Let me just say that. We shouldn't get into war. But let's just metaphorically, I'm not even saying we shouldn't get into war. I'm just saying like we need to really think about this. We need to really think about what's on the table and what we're doing. And understand, China gets a vote in this. China gets a vote in the current idiocy. But anyways, right, so we have an Nexperia. Nexperia got stolen from WingTech. All kinds of things are going back and forth. And it's weird right now, like the Europeans are having a hissy fit. The Europeans are having a hissy fit because they said words. They said very polite words. And China, man, isn't doing what the Europeans want. So basically, there were two institutions in the Netherlands that went after Nexperia. There was like the Commerce Department, some other department. Anyways, so one of the departments were like, oh, we fucked up. And so they backed off. They said, we as Europeans will take the higher road and we'll back off. But the weird part is though, right? And since they backed off, they said, we think China should open these negotiations, these discussions with us. And it's like, yeah, but you still control the CEO position. You still control the board. Right? They literally implemented their own CEO. They implemented their own board. Those motherfuckers are staying put. And so it's like, wow, look, China, you can have your company back. I mean, we are just going to impose our CEO onto you and our board onto you. But it's a Chinese company. So come on, China, man. Be fucking reasonable. Deal with colonialism the way your great-grandparents dealt with colonialism, right? That's the way of enlightenment. Isn't it hilarious? Like the Europeans are all like, we are the birthplace of the Enlightenment. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, so the interesting thing going on right now is there's this whole disaster. So China is still its own thing. The China packaging thing is still its own thing. Nexperia headquarters is still its own thing. And what it appears is that the Chinese division, the packaging division, has figured out where to buy their wafers from. So that was the big thing, right? Europe's like, well, we manufacture the wafers. So for the packaging factory to do their job, they need to get our wafers. And then the Chinaman's like, or we can buy our wafers from somebody else. What? No, you can't. You can't do that. Don't you understand? We're European. You can't just buy wafers from somebody else. That's not how the colonialism game works. Damn it. So anyways, yeah, this is coming from Reuters, and I don't know. Again, as I will put this out there. Everybody does propaganda. Yankee does propaganda. Chinaman does propaganda. So I'm not really sure how this fits in the whole thing, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Nexperia's China unit switches to local firms for wafer supplies. Documents show. So basically now, instead of buying the wafers from Europe, they are just going to buy their own wafers. And that is the interesting thing, like the whole thing of like what is valuable, right? Again, the Europeans go in and they steal the headquarters. Because in the Europeans' mind, right, the executives, the board, the HR department, the legal department, that is the real value in the company. Not those Chinese people actually building the product itself. I do think this is kind of like an interesting story, again, for industrialization, especially going into 2026. The real question of what is actually valuable in a company. And this has much wider ramifications. We talk about this things with artificial intelligence. We talk about this things with work from home or return to office, the basic understanding of KPIs. And I think there's a deeper truth to, I was at a meetup in Miami a while ago, and it was interesting. I was just sitting there drinking whatever, and I was listening to these two people talk, and they were talking about the reason that managers really want their employees to come back to the office is that they honestly do not know the KPIs, so key performance indicators of employees, basically why the employees are employed by the company. And basically the idea is if you don't know what the KPIs of employees are, then you want them in the office so you can quote unquote manage them to make sure that they're doing work. Right? And I think there might be there's a bigger question here on a much larger societal, global worldview, especially with modern industrialization. Do we understand our KPIs? Do we actually understand our value propositions? Do we understand who's valuable for what components of companies are actually the most valuable, who's actually bringing in the income and the revenue? And I think this whole question of not truly, fundamentally not understanding KPIs, I think is a much bigger issue than people really want to consider. Again, this whole thing with Nexperia. Great, you stole the headquarters. You stole the headquarters. You didn't steal the factory. What's more valuable? Right? The CEOs think they're the valuable ones. Anyways, the Chinese unit of Netherlands-based Nexperia has locked in supplies of silicon wafers from local firms to cover its entire 2026 production for one type of power chip, a document showed, after the Dutch firm stopped supplying the raw material in a corporate dispute. So this is interesting here. One, they have secured the production for all of 2026. So if they can secure the production for all of 2026, that basically means Europe is out of the game. Right? Once you can switch to somebody else, you're probably not going to go back. The other thing with this, though, again, to be clear, propaganda on all sides, is this apparently is for one particular power chip. So it may not be for everything, it may just be for one or a couple of chips. The development will allow the Chinese unit, which declared itself independent of Nexperia's European management 2 months ago, to continue manufacturing insulated gate bipolar transistor power chips and modules, switches that regulate current in electric vehicles and industrial equipment. Both governments relaxed their measures last month, but court fights and an internal battle continue over control of Nexperia, with China and Wingtech both warning that disruptions could resume without a long-term resolution. In a letter sent to its distributors earlier this month and seen by Reuters, Nexperia's China unit said it had locked in wafer production capacity for the IGBT products with local suppliers for 2026 and was accelerating verification of wafers from Wingtech's foundry, Wingtech Semi, to ensure, quote, abundant supply. The previously unreported move marks a further supply chain separation between Nexperia China and its Dutch parent that could lead to a complete split. So now imagine this. And now, again, imagine the fucking wall lickers in Europe, right? They say, oh no, China is producing these goods. They bring up these national security issues. Oh no, what if China man does something bad? That's why we have to take over Nexperia. Basically, because of their actions, because Karamans is so fucking rotted in the head, right? Apparently, from everything that I've been able to see, he still thinks he's doing a good job. He still thinks he's doing a good job. Anyways, because of this, right now China is going to have an entirely separate supply chain. They're not going to need the wafers. They're not going to need the leadership team. They're just going to produce everything in China. And then whatever the fuck Europe gets is going to be whatever the fuck Europe gets. And I think that's the interesting thing. Again, when we look at this, when we talk about national security, we see this with the Trump administration right now. The Trump administration just canceled all these offshore wind farms for, quote unquote, national security. What? And I think this is going to be a big issue that we have, especially in the Western world, going in for the next couple of years, is there's going to be so many of these national security policies that not only don't make national security better, but actually make it much worse at the end of the day. Anyways, Nexperia told Reuters that it was not in communication with its Chinese subsidiary, and the unit showed, quote, no intention to negotiate a short-term solution to restore the flow of chips to customers. The company said the IGBT products accounted for about 0.1% of Nexperia's total revenue in 2024. So that's the other thing with this too. Again, it may be Chinese propaganda. Hey, look, we can produce all the chips, all of this particular type of chips internal to China. That may not actually be a lot of what Nexperia sold. Not sure there. Nexperia China has told local distributors wafer inventory at its factory in Dongguan in southern China's Guangdong province is low, as supply from the Netherlands is not expected to resume soon, a person familiar with the matter said. Its low wafer inventory has started causing Nexperia chip shortages for Chinese automakers, especially for logic devices, transistors, and diodes, Nexperia's most popular products according to this source. Japan's Honda Motors also said earlier this week that some of its factories in China and Japan would have to temporarily suspend operations due to a shortage of chips. Wingtech Semi will supply 12-inch automotive-grade IGBT wafers, and its Shanghai production base currently has a capacity to produce 30,000 wafers per month. Apart from Wingtech Semi, Nexperia China will also receive supplies of 8-inch IGBT wafers from Shanghai GIT Semiconductor and United Nova, a fab linked to blah blah, according to the letter. So there we go. There we go. You have a headquarters in Europe that has no packaging capacity, and you have a packaging factory in China that yeah, can basically create deals with wafer companies and try to move on. So it'll be curious to see where this goes in the future. You know, as a normal person, as an average person looking at this, I get very concerned, again, about the jingoism and the propaganda, because it's all propaganda. It's all propaganda. It's European propaganda, it's American propaganda, it's Chinese propaganda. All this shit is propaganda, to be clear. One of the big questions here is, at the end of the day, again, auto factories, right? They don't solder propaganda into their cars. They solder chips and that type of thing. One of the big concerns here is how badly this might spiral out of control before anybody is really willing to deal with the ramifications of it, right? So basically that's the idea, right? So you have Europe right now, and they're trying to do their thing, and you have China trying to do their thing. They're spinning it in the way to make them look better. But if the supplies of the chips continue to go down, those are going to be fewer chips to go into fewer vehicles. All of a sudden, again, it's interesting when you read these reports, like it's weird, like names weirdly pop up. Well, you know, doing these commentary videos, it's weird how names pop up every once in a while, like Honda, right? Honda. I talked about this 2 months ago, right? Honda, the first auto manufacturing plant that was going to get hit was Honda in Mexico, right? And so we hear about Honda. So is it that Honda is particularly vulnerable to Nexperia disruptions, or is it that Honda is the only one being vaguely fucking honest about what's going on? And so one of the bigger questions here is, if Honda is just uniquely vulnerable, then it's just Honda. I'm sad for the Honda employees, but just Honda. But the curious thing that happens is, what if it's Honda and it's Nissan and it's Ford and it's all these other companies that are just as vulnerable and are getting hit the way Honda is, but they're trying to shine the turd. They're papering over, you know, what is going on. We see this in the United States with Ford right now is redoing one of their factories. So they have one of their factories. They are reconfiguring it for another vehicle that's going to be coming out. It's gonna take 10 months. It's going to take look, for 10 months, their manufacturing capacity is going to get hit because of Nexperia. No, not because of Nexperia, simply because they are doing a standard every decade revamp of a factory. Well, here's the thing, right? If this problem gets solved within 10 months, fine, whatever, right? They dealt with the optics how they dealt with the optics. The problem is, what happens if this issue goes on for 11 months and 12 months and 13 months? What happens if all these auto manufacturers, in their own way, are papering over the supply chain issues because they don't want to seem like they're vulnerable? But it doesn't mean that they're not vulnerable. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be problems. They're just papering over the issue. I think that's going to be a huge problem coming down the pike. So we will see what happens here. So what do you think about this? What do you think about Nexperia's China unit now getting their wafers for all of 2026 from Chinese suppliers? Whatever the hell these IGBT things are, I don't know. They're getting all of them for 2026 from their own suppliers. Do you think once China goes Chinese, do you think they're ever going to go back to Europe? Do you think this is as significant as it sounds? Like, oh, great. Hey, you're getting 30,000 wafers a month, but if you used to get 500,000 wafers per month, I mean, the 30,000 is nice, but it's not really a replacement. I don't know. What do you think about this propaganda? What do you think about this propaganda? Put your thoughts down below. Do remember, I do these videos in order to support Silicon Dojo, authoritiless gatekeeperless free to end user hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. We have many classes coming up. If you're interested, take a look at our schedule at silicondojo.com. If you want to help support free to end user education, there's a donor box link down below. And with that, see y'all later.